Welcome in, welcome in. How are
Well,
you guys doing?
you guys like that new intro music? I was
It's
digging
me.
on that. I'm like
Vibing
sitting
with the intro music. I almost didn't want to turn it off.
no, that was some good stuff right there. New season,
That's new
new
season
intro,
and
baby.
new intro music. All right. So we'll definitely be shouting out the artists as well. Welcome in, guys. Welcome to season 2 of
Season two, we're here.
Behind the Red Line, right? Episode 1. I am your host, Alessandra, and here on BTRL, we share stories, tips, and resources to help employees navigate their inner lives. Please help me welcome my co-host back, Rebecca. How are you?
Good. Feeling saucy.
Feeling saucy today.
Feeling
I'm feeling
saucy.
very saucy today. All right. So this, guys, is a new iteration of our show. We want to welcome you in. We want to have a safe space to discuss, our personal and our professional lives and how they intersect. So we really just want to help each other be the best versions of ourselves.
Yep. Yep.
All right. So today we are having a conversation: getting paid or getting played
Do we have
at
some
work.
announcements first? We have some announcements
We
we need to
do.
drop. Let's drop
We do
them.
have
Let's drop some
we have a
announcements.
few things. So the process media has been born.
You guys haven't
So
noticed.
that is an announcement, right? If you haven't noticed, the process media has been born as a group, and so I'm really excited for all of the new things that will be coming our way as we get started with the new shows on the lineup. Some exciting things coming down in the season, but especially for this show, we will be exclusive to YouTube only. We are airing today on all the process media platforms. However, some of these conversations may be a little too saucy for the for the LinkedIn world, if you will. So we'll be keeping these conversations exclusive to the YouTube space. So if you're not already following us on YouTube, tisk on you, head over there and make sure that you subscribe to the channel. If you subscribe to the channel, it will notify you every time we go live.
And so the process
Other
media.
announcements.
Oh, I was just gonna say, just in case you guys couldn't, haven't seen. So the process media. So we have Alessandra, Denard, and myself as the group, and then underneath we have separate shows and separate entities and separate business. Everything that we're going to provide as a business is there. We have the 3 shows going on right now. We have Voices with Denard, Behind the Red Line with myself, and Miss Alessandra, I guess this way with my camera.
Right.
And then you have the OG Process podcast with the beautiful Alessandra and Denard. It's never going away. So
AKA Sterile MD.
Sundays, Mondays, Wednesdays.
Right? So now it's even awesome. Look, it's like TNT, guys, 3 times to watch.
So
So
anyway,
Voices and BTRL are going to be airing every other week so that we all can maintain our professional lives.
yeah.
But also have opportunity to come and chat with you guys and have these type of conversations, and especially for working on the process to start. A lot of the when I started with the process, I was still working full time in the industry, so that puts an umbrella, if you will, on some of the conversation you can have. But just like when I was a manager in the office, there's just certain things I need to be able to say plainly and frankly in order for my staff to be able to thrive. And so I really wanted to create that space here and with BTRL. So I'm really excited to have you joining us, Rebecca, in the Process Media Group as an executive, as well as, just co-working with you as an entrepreneur. It's been really dope the last couple months.
Yeah, I'm fortunate, man. I can't explain how wonderful it is to work with y'all, and the knowledge alone that I've gained from working with you two is unbelievable. And I can't say enough for the emotional and mental support.
Wow.
Phenomenal.
It makes my heart happy,
So
right? Because
anyway,
I think it's like, right before we digress too deeply, I think that's something that gets missed with servant leadership and like empathic leadership, and what does that mean, right? And
yeah,
it's there when you can connect you can support each other mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and you know, and it's in all these ways, right? So it's like we're friends, but we care about each other. We're professionals, so we push each other. You know, so it's been nice to have that bloom in all different areas of our lives the last couple of months. I like it.
It's wonderful.
I like it a lot, and it's taken us many places.
Yeah, I can't believe it. I've never like I was never one to travel. I've never gone to like conferences out of state,
Right.
and I've traveled more in the past year than I have ever in my entire life.
Yeah.
So that's pretty freaking awesome.
Man, I thought I was well traveled until until this year. I've been look. Let's see if I can name all the cities. I've been in Philly. I've been in Oakland, San Antonio, Phoenix, Nashville, St. Louis. I think that's it. I think that's it. Oh, Vegas. We just came from Vegas.
Vegas.
Gosh.
Yep.
So yeah, and technically, currently, I'm in Richmond, California. So, so it's been cool, right? Like traveling with the process, and I think that's been one cool thing about sterile processing too, because I got my first travel experiences out of being a tech.
Yes.
So that's what led me to sterile processing out in California. But you know, speaking of getting paid or getting played, I've made a lot of different incomes for the same work all over the country. So it's really interesting to see how different markets are impacted and what sterile processes are making, you know, across the country. I found that to be interesting. But recently, when I was unpacking here in California to move back towards the Midwest, I found some of my old check stubs. You want to
How
go?
did that feel? How did
Oh,
that like for real? How did that compare? Like what did you think?
okay. So one, it's not the first time I've come across this box, right? So I have a box of mementos, and one of the things that I keep in there are some of my first check stubs from when I started at the hospital. So it's felt different along the way to get this box. And opening it this time, it was just like, wow.
Huh.
Because when I left, so when I started as a tech one, I was making $7.75 an hour. And then because of different like market analysis, market adjustments, and we can definitely talk about what that is.
Yep.
Um, but because of that, over the years, my pay was increased. And so I want to highlight that because that was not about merit or time in the job. That market analysis gets done by the compensation department, and they do it routinely so that they can make sure that they're being competitive in the market. And so what they'll do is they will check if they're a system, they'll check their price points for salary within their system, and then they'll also check their competition, right? So the folks that are around them.
How do they do that? Like how do they do that?
That is something I don't know. And we should definitely find someone to talk to about it because I am interested to hear more about the process. And
Yeah.
how, especially when it comes to like how available is that data? Is that something that we can all go find out? You
Right.
know, what the sister hospitals around the corner are paying? I would love to know. So we
I
can.
faced that with my educator role because it was something new to the facility, and I could see elsewhere, in the community outside of my state, that there was a set salary range. But when if I were to bring that information to my HR department, I don't know. It didn't go well. Let me just leave it at that.
Well,
It didn't go. It didn't. I wouldn't say it didn't go well, but I think when this was happening, the educator role was still new in sterile processing.
yeah.
It's exploded in the past like 3 years. So,
Yeah,
but
partially
I've
because of
always
the standards changing. But yes, it's complicated because even within your hospital, you know, going and is they have this kind of like connotation in the workspace that you can always just go in and ask for a raise, right? And it's not to say that you can't, but there's a process inside the hospital. And so I can only speak from my seat as a manager of SPD. Um, but we would have to request that. with our leaders, right? So if I had a director, they would have to go to their director. Usually, it meant having to have a meeting with compensation with HR. One of the things that was always really prevalent was the first thing they want to do is search their system and make sure that they're not already paying somebody more or less for this job, or they don't already have this job in another area, right? So like if they're creating an educator position, they very well look at what are educators being paid for any area of their facility, right? That might be something they take into consideration. Or just within your department, maybe within your system, so on and so forth. So I got lucky that in that sense that my hospital was routinely doing these market analysis, and when they would find that they weren't paying the techs as much as like Paducah, or because I was around like Southern Illinois, Southern Missouri, like Boot Hill area, and when they would find that they weren't paying as much, they would give us the a
Range or
raise, right?
market adjustment.
So you get these adjustments, which also, while it was very nice to get extra money on my check, it also created a lot of tension in the department because veteran employees would be upset that new employees were getting the same raises that they
Yeah,
were.
it causes a ripple,
It definitely did.
especially when the new employees coming in are starting at a higher wage because the market is there.
Because the
Things
market has
that
adjusted.
aren't they're not there.
They're not there, right? And trying to explain, nobody cares the explanation when they're not getting as much, right? Or when they feel like you're getting the same and you
Right.
just got here. But
Um,
man, I tried not to take it too personal.
well, I wanted to, what you were saying kind of played on something I was reading about yesterday. So we still have a lot to learn about the connection between the perception and reality of compensation, but there's some interesting data points to look at. So people are off. This was interesting. People are often wrong about how much they are compensated compared to the market rate. In fact, 2/3 of people who are getting paid the market rate believe that they are getting underpaid, which represents a huge
Yes.
discrepancy.
Yes.
Perceptions about pay play a significant role in an employee's desire to leave your company. The bottom line is if you don't communicate to your employees the market range slash or AKA the talent market, they may leave. So those transparent conversations about money can actually also mitigate low pay. So if an employer pays lower than the market average for a position, but communicates clearly about the reasons for the smaller paycheck, 82% of employers we surveyed still felt satisfied with their work. Sorry, my cat's screaming in the
Oh no.
background.
You
But I
saying
thought,
yep.
and then this article also went on to say, conversely, overpaying employees in an effort to retain them without having the pay conversation doesn't ensure that they are more satisfied.
Nope.
So I think that's interesting because, as a manager, we really need to be armed with accurate market data reflecting the talent markets consistently to be able to have these conversations with your employees. And as an employee, like, it would be nice to know how I can research this on my own, right? It's
Yeah.
2020. Like
Shoot, I
we
mean, even in this, yeah, I was about to say, even in this environment, I'm not
2022.
sure.
Sorry, I got that wrong.
I'm not sure. I just assumed I cut you off on that, but
Sorry, call me out, guys.
I don't know where you can find, like, I know there you can find like national data for averages. And then there's also some calculators out there online where you can find like ranges of pay by position, like the Federal Bureau of Jobs has some of that information. But just in general, I wish it was just more common knowledge. And I think as employees continue to come into these spaces and having conversations, I mean, like we're watching TikTok and videos where employees are at work, for hours on end at their jobs, or they're having really frank discussion about what they're being paid, why they're leaving, so on and so forth. I'm not actually shocked to hear that such a high percentage of people assume that they're being paid less without actually knowing that they're being paid less.
Right, right.
It's also not shocking to me that you could have a cohort of people that would accept the fact that they're being paid less with reason. Because I remember, like, even in my small town, like making 775 in that area was not really sustainable, but it also wouldn't have taken a whole lot more in order for it to be comfortable. Because it was, I think at the time my 2-bedroom townhouse was like $500 a month or something like that.
Right. And it's crazy how
So
things change.
yeah, it changes things. Like versus fast forward to being a travel tech, and I think about average I was making about $18 an hour. But that the travel thing is also kind of complicated and convoluted because you got all these different tax incentives that are factoring into it. But it was a significantly more money every 2 weeks than when
Yeah,
I was
that's
working, right? Shoot. And so even at management level, because when I left, I was a supervisor, and I made it up to $11. So you know, it was far more comfortable as a single female in that area at making almost $12 an hour than the 775. However,
hey.
moving out into the California market, that exploded. I made ended up making six figures in management, which would have never been possible, right? Never been possible in that area.
It's kind of great. Like, I don't know. Through the stuff that I was reading about with this situation, it's women, specifically women of color. Um, it's not happening. It's not equal. It never has been, and it's not happening still.
It's not looking good.
And the type of jobs that, statistically, the type of jobs that women of color have are lower, like, there was a term that they were using, like office housework kind of stuff. So
Mhm.
like EVS stuff, paper pushing, that kind of thing, that doesn't set the employee up for professional development, um,
Yeah.
promotions, that kind of thing. They're not well respected. And then you compare it to white women, or specifically white males. There is that gap. There's a stunning gap. Um, there's still a wage gap between women and men, but it's a
Yep.
lot narrower than it used to be. But
Right? Like
it
there's been
still
progress, but we
exists.
still need to see such radical shifts in
But
order to really close those gaps.
like, how do you? We're here to talk about getting paid or getting played. So you have to first recognize that you're getting disrespected at work, and some of the factors that can help you figure out that you're not getting respect at work, you're not getting credit for the work that you're doing, or somebody else is taking the credit for what you're doing.
Yeah. Which
You
happens
are.
often. And I think, again, I think more so for women of color, but anytime we're looking at a degree of harm,
Yeah,
right? Race and gender are going to play a factor. Class is going to play a factor. Um,
100%.
right. And so we see employees come into this space and they can essentially be abused because you're being either, for instance, a client that I worked with out here in California, young lady worked at a particular facility for a number of years and very adept, very like well known in her space to be competent. However, anytime those management positions became available, she never got chosen to be moved up in her system.
Yeah.
So eventually it became clear it's not happening here, right? Because first you do the check. Is it me? Is it something that I'm doing? Am I not showing up in the space properly? Am I not educated enough?
And
Because
a lot
sometimes
of
they're telling
people,
you it's not a degree, you need a certificate, right?
but
But
that is emotional abuse in a way.
I find it to be. I find it to be, and I think I think there are a lot of managers that don't understand that that's what they're doing.
Hmm.
Because especially if you keep that person in a lower position but you maintain a high amount of responsibility for them, that's abuse. You're
Yes.
not allowing them to claim that name, that title right. You're not allowing them to be able to trade on that experience. So when it comes to a resume, I would say that that person is absolutely getting played
Yeah.
because you can't write down interim supervisor or manager or director or whatever it is that you're being asked to do
That's
above and
not your
beyond what
job
you're getting
title.
paid, right? Because
It's
it's
not your
not
job.
your job title.
It's not in your job
Now,
description.
some people say those are, and they can, I do think they can be sometimes opportunities for you to learn prior to stepping into a particular role. But that should be a conversation that's established, and and this is something that we're doing together. I've been able to come to some of my bosses and say, can I tag along with you to certain meetings, or can I be responsible for certain work so that I can learn? And it was never, I'm just going to continuously do this,
Right.
forever without ever being able to move into that role.
I think that after a certain point, though, if you're exceeding your, you keep doing more work than that's out of your job description, and that you're not getting recognized for, and the whole wondering like, what's wrong with me? What can I do different? What am I doing wrong? Like, what do I need to succeed?
It's the trauma
That's
response.
that's that mental component that
Yeah.
can really make or break a situation.
It
Like
can set up as imposter syndrome, which we covered in season one. So you guys can definitely go back on the YouTube and find. But it sets up as imposter syndrome because you begin to question yourself, your sanity, your worth in that space, right? Because as you said, because your employees are not having that conversation with you about your compensation, and they're not at this point allowing you to match that in your job space.
yeah,
So it plays against corporations and entities too, because then you lose your talent, right? So they go off somewhere else where they can get that respect, they can get that title, they can get that pay,
yeah.
and now you're left with a very expensive vacancy to now fill. So it's important, I think, for both sides to have a clear understanding of what goes wrong so that they can truly address it. But for the employees, it's just when the writing is on the wall, listen. If they're not valuing you, go where the respect is being served.
And value goes a long way. If your time off is not being respected, like if you're being asked to work like extra shifts, come in on the weekends, work overtime, and you're not being respected or even thanked for that, that's value right there, and that's a huge thing. You're getting played. You're
Getting
getting played.
played.
There's a certain amount that, like, I don't know, I used to feel like, hey, if I'm pulling these extra shifts, it's going to show that I have all this, I'm dedicated. But you guys got to set limits.
Yeah.
You can show that you're dedicated and you're a hard worker and you're passionate and you want to keep moving forward, but don't let, you can't let people, once you do it a few days, they're going to start asking you, they're going to start
Right. It's like
expecting you
the if you
to.
give the mouse a cookie story.
So yeah, like when you go to clock out at like 5:30 instead of 8:30, they're gonna be like, "Why are you leaving early?" I'm like, "Because it's the end of my shift."
Oh, and trust and believe. I'm guilty. I'm guilty of that. As a leader, I'm absolutely 100% guilty of that. Where I had certain employees where routinely they would stay over. So if I saw them leaving on time, in my mind, I'm going, "Why are they leaving early?
Yep.
You're leaving early?
I
Wait, no, wait, you're leaving on time? What's going on?"
That started to happen with me too, with some person in particular, and I was like, I had to catch myself.
Yeah. It's
Stop
it's
this.
easy to fall into, and I definitely think if as an employee, as an individual, doesn't have a real understanding of their own boundaries, of the ways in which they're trying to get like attention or accolades. um some folks really do thrive in the workspace because it's their first space where they get to be seen as an individual that is competent and able to and has something to offer in that space, because home life can be very dynamic in a lot of different ways, right? So we see that employees need to feel respected, they need to feel like they're being paid their worth. But a lot of times, like you said, that pay is almost inconsequential, because if they have tied their personality into that job, then that is the beginning and the end for them. So you can almost, it's again, and that's thinking of it as abusive, right? You can almost do anything to them. You can call them at any time and they're coming in.
Yeah.
You can, ask them to stay over any amount of hours. You can ask them to do work for free. They will do it. And it's up to the individual that's in charge not to take advantage of them. And we're not even talking about like the rules and laws and regulations around it, but just what happens between two people.
Have you ever worked at a facility that didn't pay you for the hours you worked?
Well,
I know a facility, but I don't know your story.
I have in a few different ways too. So I have definitely been the person that came and worked the extra hours, even though I knew I was salary and I wasn't going to be paid for that work. And my bosses received that work, even though they knew they weren't going to be paying me for that work, right? So I've been in spaces where it's like, okay, hey, I'm gonna that really big project, that we're working on. I'm gonna come on the weekend, spend two shifts here, and try to catch up and get it done. And they say, yay, thanks, right? So they don't say, no, please wait until Monday because we're not paying you for Saturday and Sunday, right? But I'll take full accountability for that, and they should take full accountability for their side. But but I've also had spaces where, um, even in management, where overtime was paid and my hours were not honored, and I didn't receive my check. So it was interesting.
So yeah, wage theft, illegal.
Illegal wage theft.
And it still happens. Like, this is why I'm a huge advocate of, yes, you're clocking in with the time clock, and even if you're regardless if you're salary salary or hourly, please make sure that you're keeping track of your own hours,
Yeah,
because
keep track of your hours.
keep track of your hours. And
Look, you're legally obligated to do so, especially when it comes to your
mhm,
time card. You check it.
check your own stuff, because people make mistakes,
People do make mistakes.
whether it's intentional or not.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not going to reflect on your pay card. Now, even in some places, you get workers that are being paid below the minimum wage for their state, and that is illegal.
Yeah.
Not being paid for the hours you work, workers not being paid overtime or time and a half, that's also illegal.
Yeah. It's illegal.
Um, some
And
employers,
if you're in a union space, check your contract because there's also many layers to your pay.
yeah, you want to make sure that you check your pay stubs so they're not taking any illegal deductions from your paychecks. This can happen with some of those. I don't want to throw anybody on blast, but sometimes with those independent traveling places, you never know. Like, you need to.
Oh yes, there's. Let me see if I can find it while we're talking. There's a lawsuit going on but maybe I shouldn't. There's a lawsuit going on with a travel company on the nursing side, and they're contending that they were brought in on a contract with an established rate of pay, and after they came in and started work, they were told we're going to be dropping your pay down to a lower rate, and you can either take it or you can get out of here. And there's a couple of them that have gotten together and they're filing a lawsuit for back pay. But I've also heard that in the travel space for SPD, where technicians have been asked to renew their contracts at lower rates,
Yeah,
which is insane.
right.
Insane. That's definitely a place where I would say advocate for your pay. I would say that for any contract renewal. I'm not coming back at the same rate.
Yeah. And then you got to make sure they're paying you in a timely fashion. There are still, for most of us that are working in an actual, like, a hospital, that's not much. Dare I say, is it not much of an issue? But if you're working for,
Oh yes, it is.
well, okay, this is my, please, 'cause
Oh yes, it
a
is.
lot of the time,
So,
a lot of the people
yes,
think
it
that,
is. The reason why I say that is a few things. One, a lot of our stuff is now, especially right, everything is very high tech. So sometimes there can be discrepancies between your payroll system, your check issuer system, and things don't come out on time. So that's something that can happen. But within the hospital space, from management perspective, when employees are transitioning, like if they're leaving, you got that final check. There's certain time frame in which it has to be paid.
yes,
Or even for you as a new employee, when you start, there's a certain time frame in which you have to receive that check. And you talking about mistakes. I made that mistake one time as a new manager with a new employee's time card, and I'm thinking, oh, I fixed it. It's great. It's fine, or whatever. And my boss comes storming in, and they're like, "What the? This has to go. This has to go." And I'm like, "What are you talking about? It will. It's gonna get there next, whatever." She's like, "No, no, you don't understand. It's illegal. You have to issue it. So now we have to kick it to a whole other department, and they're gonna have to do their own magic to make sure that person gets a check today. So it can always be really stressful. And I remember that for like our admins and stuff, that payroll for them was always extremely stressful because they would be handling hundreds of employees, and there's a time clock for all of it. You have to get your data in on certain times so that the payroll system can kick out checks at a certain time, so on and so forth. So, and
Do you,
holidays it changes too. So that's always,
right. I forgot about that. 'Cause
yep.
my thought went to like your regular biweekly check.
Yeah,
I,
it,
I hate that. Anyway, that's a whole other topic. But
it can happen. It
it can
can
happen.
happen. You know, something can get coded incorrectly, and then you get your check, but you don't get that money. That's the same thing. You're not getting your full pay. So now they're in a legal space where they have to close it out. So that's why they'll ask you to come pick the paper check up instead of get the direct deposit, or or things like that. It can, it happens.
Mm,
It happens.
yeah. So like, what can people do if they feel like they're getting played?
I think it depends on how you're being played.
Hmm.
If it's really like, if it's more emotional, where you're being asked to go above and beyond your scope, um it's not that you're not being paid for this work or whatever, but you're being asked to go outside. I think some of the things that you need to do first is to do a personal inventory for you as
What,
a, right, for you, go ahead,
what's a personal inventory?
of yourself.
But what
Do
does that
some
mean?
do
What
some
does that
self
mean?
reflection on your motivations of why you do what you do. If you, like, for instance, with coaching clients, I have some coaching clients that they will chastise themselves. They'll say, okay, when my boss asks me, I say yes, but I don't really want to. And I'm like, well, why did you say it? And the first thing that comes out of their mouth is, I don't know. No. So let's try to figure it out now. What do we know? We know that when they ask, you feel panic. We know that when they ask you, you feel like you have to. So now let's explore the have to. What is it that makes you feel like you have to do that, right? So you start asking those questions and just kind of breadcrumb yourself back to the source of this thing. Now, it can be something as simple as, I've always been raised and told that if a leader asks you to do something, you say yes, right? And we
Yeah,
start to break, right? We start to break down that thought process. Like, you've been taught that. Now, what do you believe?
whole lives.
Right?
Whole
What
lives.
actually makes sense and what works for you? It may just be a reframing of your thought process. Um, and if it's literally you're being asked to work outside of your scope, in positions that of higher rate of pay, my advice would be to simply stop. Now, that's not always easy, because if you set a tone with someone, it could be very disruptive, right, to change it. But I think that's another space where, like, my granny used to say this all the time, you train people how to treat you, right? This is why we don't want to
Mm,
build this habit in the first place. But it's the same way, like, you built it, you walk it back. Have that conversation. Hey, this is starting to feel a little overwhelming for me, so I'm gonna start decreasing some of these extra things that I've been doing, and open that door for that conversation.
yeah,
Try it anyway.
that's some pretty. And so, right, you can go to them and say, "Hey, I'm starting to feel overwhelmed." But what if you enjoy the extra work you're doing and you want a different, you want more money, more recognition, more
Mm.
position, more responsibility? How do you phrase it to your employer? So, like, how do you strategize how to have a conversation directly with your manager about this stuff?
I think you do it just like that. Like, I think you get real. You come to them and you have that conversation with them of, I'm looking for more. I'm looking for advancement. That's something, especially in the job space, that is very common lingo, right? They'll ask you why you're moving on to your next position. Because I'm looking for more opportunities. I'm looking to expand myself. I'm looking to learn new things. So, and I think it's important, if you're at a space, especially if you like your job, if you like your job environment, I think it behooves you to check in with them and say, hey, I really love working here, and as an individual, I'm looking for some growth, and these are the things that I'm interested in. and I want to stay here. Is there any space that you can see that I can be able to do that? They
That's
may,
a
you know,
really important thing to say because you never know who's looking at you or what. But
no,
I'm telling you, not too many people come to leadership and say, "Hey, I want to grow."
no, not
It's
too many.
important that if you want more responsibility, you say something.
Yeah. If you want to say something, I think in our space, like I think it's again something socialized where we think the only way to get folks' attention is to show them these talents and skills, right? So if I just work hard enough, they'll see it. My drive. If I just stay longer, they'll see my drive. Rather than let me talk to them about my drive,
Yeah, you
right?
have to talk. You have to
Let
communicate.
me come
You
and
can't assume
communicate to
that
them that
people are
I'm
seeing
very
it.
passionate about this, and this is why I do what I do, and give them that different frame of view. Because one, especially with jobs, you never know when a position is being created. Um, there's always something in the works, and at some level, right? And like you said, you don't know who's noticing you for what.
Right.
But
And it also,
even like in the LinkedIn space, I recently saw a job be posted by somebody in my industry space that has now transitioned into a new space. And I just sent them a message. Do you think that my skills that I have over there can translate over here? And they were very direct. They were like, you know what? Not this particular position because XYZ, but there's going to be 10 more coming up that you probably will be able to find a fit. So, and I'm able to have that conversation. So, if I had never, introduced myself or introduced that I was interested, that person would not even be thinking about me in that space. But now I'm on their mind at the least,
yeah.
and I know some steps that I can take to move forward. But it all
And
starts with communication.
yeah. And depending also on your leadership team's style of leading, you may have certain leaders that are going to be perceptive to the quality work you're putting out and your knowledge base. But in reality, there's a lot of leaders that aren't the education space for leadership in the sterile processing industry is not, it's not good. So you
Nah.
have a huge leadership base that may not pick up on those things.
Yeah.
You need to tell them because they're focused on other things. And also a lot of us, and I say us because I'm new, I'm in leadership and I still feel new to it in a lot of ways. I'm heading into a new job, but a lot of us um, our focuses are elsewhere.
Yes.
So,
Yes. Please don't assume
question.
that if the manager's not communicating that they're just not thinking about it.
And I
Um,
was just gonna, I lost my train of thought there. I'm so sorry. I lost
no,
my train of thought for a second. But I was gonna say, without the leadership education, you have a lot of leaders out there that don't, they're not gonna notice these things and
okay.
pick up on it. And you
Mm-mm.
can't assume, man.
No,
You
you
have
can't assume.
to just talk.
You can't assume, and it is really important to note that because there are problems with leadership being able to execute their positions, and it is true. There's as far as new manager trainings and new manager orientations, there are a lot of required courses that you have to step into when you take those new roles. However, they're not necessarily, kind of that real world experience. You may or may not get to them before you get to the situation. So, like for instance, if I'm start on August 1st, but the next time an attendance training isn't until October, I still have to be responsible for my time in my department prior to me being able to take that class,
Yeah.
right? So it really can become a challenge. And I think it is something that does need to be acknowledged that, leaders are learning just like techs are learning, just like frontline employees are learning. So we have to have grace for folks, but at the same time, like I say all the time, there's a couple things I don't play with, and my money is one of them. So my grace can only go so far. So we had a
So
question come
much.
up from Kyle Simpson. Hi, Kyle. Kyle worked with me in my Memorial days. Says, have you ever had an issue with one shift receiving preferential treatment over another, and how did you address it? So,
Shift wars.
shift wars. I think we have a process episode about like literally about shift wars.
There's a couple
But
different things out there on social media about shift wars, and
yes,
it really boils down to it's your crew's perception of what is going down, and it also boils down to leadership not communicating properly, right?
Shoot,
And
yeah. I
stop
saw
it.
shift wars. Okay, I have two different perspectives on shift wars, right? Because I've been a shift tech. I've also been a leader.
Me too. Me too.
Okay. Let's talk about both sides.
Yes, please.
I want to talk about it from the tech side first. Have you ever had an issue with one shift receiving preferential treatment? Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I've worked on every shift that sterile processing has to offer. I started 3 to 11 for 5 years.
That's
I did overnights. Yes, yes. I did overnights as a traveler and in a city of no less. I've done days, of course, as manager, and also as manager, I've worked whatever, right? So maybe my shift today is 7 to 3, tomorrow it's 9 to 5, the next day it's 11 to 7, the day after that is 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. So you don't, or and maybe the night after that I'm getting called in at 3 o'clock in the morning. So you see a little bit of everything.
yeah.
But working 3 to 11, what I would find is yes, there's that component of perception, period, right? Because you're there with your group, y'all are in your own echo chamber. So when one person asks, do you feel like they're getting treated better than us? And the next person is like, of course, because XYZ, right? And it just becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy all the time.
Yeah, a
Uh,
lot of the time, like that crew, I'm sorry, the second shift crew, y'all are another beast
it
because
is.
it is so busy during those hours. And well, second shift is it's that. But what I always tried to say was like, damn, we are slammed right now. But if people were comparing, to the first shifters just sitting around waiting for cases, I'm sorry, but we don't have the OR blasting us with phone calls right now.
We sure don't. And so, okay, so shift to shift, right? Day shift, what I would experience is it's more emotionally stressful
100%.
because it's the calls and the running and the steps are insane. Like as far as walking and work, right? But it was more interaction with
Turnover. Yep.
individuals, more, hard pressed expectations.
Yeah.
And although you did have the fact that evening shift and night shift have replenished kits for you, if there were any issues with those, right, you just into immediate fires. So and that goes strong well until after lunch break, right? So
Yeah.
they don't, they're not up hustling and bustling necessarily with kids. Some places are so busy that it doesn't matter, right? It's trays all day, every
Yep.
day.
All day, every
But
day.
then second shift, of course, is getting a different flavor of work, right? So the phone calls start to go down because the people are leaving, but the complexity of the phone calls goes up because the kits
100%.
have been used, right? So the stress is still there. But then they also get that quiet time because I'm gonna be honest, 3 to 11 shift in a small town, when that work got caught up, we were kicking it just like day shift was kicking it from 7 to 9:30,
Well,
right?
that,
So
yeah, no, I've had
everybody gets their perks,
I've had that
and
perspective, and then at a trauma center though, it was it was the worst
you
because
had to
your
move it.
staffing goes down and
Staffing goes down.
all this stuff you got to turn over. I'm sorry. I'm
Yes.
just
No, and then not so then you move into night shift, right?
oh,
Where you're the forgotten stepchild of everyone. Nobody makes
100%.
sure that you have all the information you need to do your job.
And you have a
Nobody's
skeleton crew.
making sure you have all the
Skeleton
resources you
crew.
need to do your job.
No resources.
Nobody's bringing you snacks and goodies and candies.
You're left
So
out. Third shift, overnight
you're
shift,
getting
left
blamed.
out of the communication. You're left out of changes in the department. You
You're
might get
left
an
out of the
email. You're left
community.
out, but you're expected to be the cleanup crew when there's only
Oh
three
yes.
of you.
Oh yes.
It's
And
not fun.
I can say for my crew at Memorial, because that was first of all, it was an exceptionally talented group of people in the sense that every tech was very well versed on every area, and was really passionate about their instrumentation. So it was a small team. Usually we had no more than maybe 5 or 6 people on our good days. But everybody was a real go-getter. So it made the work go a lot faster. But you did notice that there were different relationships between the managers and techs on day shift, right? And that's just natural. because they work together,
Because they work together.
right?
That's something that I
So
think
I
is
would
so
just
hard.
like I would expect that the techs that I work with on 3 to 11, me and them are closer.
Right.
That was
It's
a natural byproduct,
right.
man.
And it
But
can get toxic
it,
when the right, it can get toxic real easy if you chime into those conversations. So it's important to stay on board. Just don't focus on that. Like if there's some stark issues, that's a
I'm about to
different thing.
say, if it has to do with your pay or your job positions or your ability to
Harassment,
advance, harassment, then it's something that needs to be escalated.
that's a
I do
different level.
feel. But if it truly is, they just seem to have a friendlier relationship with each other. I would really love to see people just calm down
Yeah,
and focus on
check your
yourself.
perspective.
Yeah,
Check
check
yourself.
your perspective.
Check yourself.
Because even when it comes to like the food and the snacks and stuff, all that stuff is extra. Nobody's required to give us that stuff. So while it's nice to get it, and it sucks to not get it if somebody else is receiving it, grow up though
But you
a
also
little
can't
bit.
expect, like,
Grow up,
if this lady on first shift wants to bring in a bunch of
right?
snacks,
Wants
you
to
can't
bring a bunch of
you can't expect. Listen, we and there's another question from
That's what
Kyle
I'm
coming up.
saying.
But it costs a lot of money. If the department's not paying for it, you can't expect one person to feed 50 people. Maybe once in a
No.
while, yeah. But I'm just saying, shiitake is
Mm-mm.
expensive out there.
Actually, you can't expect it at all. And let me just be
No.
the first one to tell you if nobody else is going to tell you. You can't expect it at all. Because unless those managers are given department budgets to buy that stuff with, you shouldn't be expecting them to spend their money on you if you're not spending your money on them. That's, you know what I mean? Like, that's not, there's no reasonable expectation that I would think my employees are going to be buying me gifts and cookies and snacks. And I don't think there's any reason why employees should expect that those things are going to come from their managers. Now, if you want to have a conversation with your leader about what types of things make you feel seen, appreciated, that's one thing. But just to come in and be like, there's supposed to be donuts here. No. No.
So
Yeah.
Kyle also says he remembers somebody getting upset about potlucks. Is that you?
Heck yeah. We ain't gonna get into it, look, because I ain't finna do you like that on Front Street. But heck yeah, man. Us with the especially with stuff like that, right? Because we're doing things. I said they get left out the community when you're doing these things that are team building activities within the department. That I do think there is then an expectation, and as a leader, it was something that I really tried to keep in the front of my mind is how I felt as a
It's
tech.
important.
Right. So if it was SPD week, I'm gonna make sure that I have stuff for a day shift, that I have stuff for evening shift. I would find ways to make sure that I got fresh food in for a night shift. Even if that meant ordering them breakfast in the morning rather than just getting the pizza and the or Chinese food that's available late night. Right. Cause I even ran into that. It was like I'm always trying to make sure they have fresh food, but at 11, 12 a.m., their options are slim, right? I can't get them the fancy stuff that I'm getting for days and evenings. So I either got to find a way to keep it for them, which sometimes I did. I would buy things and package it so that it was there for them to heat up, or get them hot breakfast on their way out, whatever, or cook. I've made meals for my team before.
Yeah.
Um, so
And
there's different ways. There's different ways.
it also like that makes me it almost like it ties into the another train of thought about this conversation because like yeah, you may not be getting paid, but once you find out, like, once you if you once you have that transparent conversation with your superiors about pay, what's going on in your head, and if they can relay the information, anybody can go to HR and ask them for a salary range for your position. That is free information for you. You can just shoot an email, whatever you need to do. Now, you can also address it with HR directly. Has there been a recent market study done with my position?
I'd
But
highly encourage it, especially if you're in a union environment. I would highly encourage your shop
yeah,
stewards to do that routinely. One,
yes,
just to make sure that everybody's aware that you guys are paying attention. Now, from a management perspective, I can say sometimes it does get annoying to have to field those questions because it
yes.
wasn't my job, right? I can't control it. I can't determine the range. And in some instances, I'm not allowed to give you that information. But to your point, you can always go to HR. You can always there's always a way to find this stuff out.
Right. And then, but the money is only one factor. like if you don't, you have to feel like you belong there. You need to feel the respect from your crew, and that
I don't know.
we all have mouths to feed. We all have whatever.
We do, but
But if
see,
you're
the only reason why I hesitate to say, I think employees have the right to feel safe and welcome at work.
right,
But I think to your point earlier, the reality is different for a
right,
lot of people for a lot of different reasons. And I think from a dollars and cents perspective of having to pay your bills, sometimes you're not always going to be able to be in a position where you're working at a place that respects you.
right,
And that's where I say that personal inventory comes into place, because then you have to decide if this is worth it to you. I've had experiences where coming to work was the most hazing, the most, just bullying type of experience for months and months, right? There's not a lot practically that I could do to relieve that situation. Now, of course, when we're talking about the established steps, right? So what are you legally able to do? I can go to my manager, right? I can go to my HR department. But if I go to my manager and my manager's the problem, or if I go to my HR department and my HR department can't prove the problem, right? Because we're talking about these interpersonal relationships, I'm stuck. And I might now even be in a worse position, because now that person that was bullying me is aware that I've told other people that they're bullying me.
yeah,
And where there is now that I have the legal protection of no retaliation, I don't really have that on the floor, right? Because that's not really how social networks work. So it's easy to say you should just go find a place where you feel respected. But there are a lot of different, I mean, we could go on forever about the gender issues, misogyny in the workspaces. I've talked to women that have been let go from their management positions simply because they're women.
yep,
I've talked to women that have been told not to apply for certain jobs because they're women. And then of course from the race factor, it's a whole nother ball game. So I would like to say just always be able to just have that conversation, but I do think a lot of times it comes down to you and what do you feel comfortable with? Are you comfortable with the rate of pay that you're receiving? Are you comfortable with the benefits package that you have? Are
right,
you comfortable coming into this space? And if there's any of those questions come up as no, it then becomes okay, now what can I do about that? Because
right,
you can sometimes you are in a safe enough space you can advocate for it at work, but it may mean making a transition,
yeah.
you know. Mm. And
Kyle asked,
transitions can look different. You made a major transition this year.
I did, I did. I'm leaving my role as an educator at a smaller facility to go back to a hospital where I used to work, a level 1 trauma center as a manager. So it's huge.
Huge.
And this time around, I know what I'm getting into, but it's gonna be a big, sharp learning curve. But again, it's a transition. You do that self assessment. I call Alessandra. I'm like, I need some coaching right now.
No, no.
She's really good at
And
it, guys.
and then like even with that, I made that transition.
Uh, Kyle asked a question. What do you
He's
feel, or sorry, why do you feel that pay for sterile processing is so low for such a demanding position? Because healthcare sucks. No, I'm just kidding.
ding, ding. No, I have a pretty spicy opinion on this. I'm gonna let you
Let's
go
hear it.
first. I'm gonna say I'll let you
Want
go
me to go
first. Yes.
I don't know. I still feel like there's so many places that think that it's just washing dishes.
Yeah.
And I got to be honest with you, some of the education out there for our some of the education out there is not technical enough. I do not feel, here we go, this is the spice. Sometimes I feel like if I'm looking through one of the certification boards, education plans, prepping for certification, it's not that challenging. I'm sorry. It's not. Sometimes it's really hard, but it's gotten dumbed down, and I don't like that. I don't like
Yo,
that.
let's
I
keep it
think
100.
let's keep it 100.
When I started sterile processing, it was in a rural area, and there was no mention made of a certification. Didn't even know that thing existed. I worked in the space for no, maybe 2 or 3 years before we became aware. And that same cohort of individuals, we just bought the books ourselves. And what we did was
Yeah.
we got together as a study group for, I want to say, and I hope, I don't know if Kyle, I don't know, Kyle, were you around at that time? But I'm talking about maybe a couple of weeks. We met on a couple Saturdays. We made some flashcards. We read the vocabulary words. We quizzed each other, and we passed the test. So it was, and I would say a reason why that was so easy for us was because we were science and chemistry nerds coming out of high school, right? So when we're reading the anatomy and physiology, this is cakewalk. When we're reading the microbiology, this is basics, right? So, and it is not enough for what you need in order to operate in this space, which I think is why they require that year of experience to be layered onto it. So, but let's not digress too far. I agree. I think the reason why sterile processing routinely is paid at such a low wage and is such a demanding and complicated science based job is because it's seen as service work. It's seen as dishwashing, right? And I think, especially in this country, a lot of jobs that have been regulated into service work are jobs that were routinely done by Black and Brown people, especially during enslaved times here in this country. So I think as healthcare itself has grown into a science, because it was not always that way. A lot of these doctors and nurses back in the day were looked at as total quacks. If you go back and you actually look at their histories, their autobiographies, they were not always well received.
No, and
Um,
they did some terrible things.
and they did some horrible things in the name of their science and their craft, if you will. But that is the basis and the foundation of our healthcare system, right? So as we have decided and labeled certain jobs, ones that have been coupled up with college or degrees are automatically and routinely seen as deserving, right? These are now careers, these are now professions, versus those support services or allied health services. Even though they technically need probably about the same amount of schooling, they're getting that work done by word of mouth, by hands on knowledge being passed down. And not to go too much into a diatribe, but this would be something that we would see in those spaces as well. If you're living in a times where you own people and you don't have to clean, you don't have to cook, you don't have to do whatever it is that you feel is laborious. You don't then have schools for those people too. You're expecting for your employees to train each other, right? And so that's exactly the climate that we see in sterile processing.
I
Everybody that is in a white lab coat is seen as high value, and everybody that is in allied services is seen with no value. The folks on that white lab coat side get continuous education built into their programs. They get more training before they start their positions versus sterile processing, where it is word of mouth. Like you said, education only just recently took off.
Right. And that's why I have hope for this to change, because
Heck yeah.
more and more hospitals have educators and they're being titled as sterile processing clinical
Yeah.
educator. So it puts them
They
in
still getting played,
100%.
but go on.
But let me just say,
But yeah,
when you have an educator and an education program you have you have something gold that can truly give you data to report up. And
yeah.
the more you have a clinical educator in place in your surgical services sector, the more and more it will get communicated to the environment that this is some real ish right here. You
Sure.
can't just throw somebody back in decontam. There's a science behind it. So
Well,
when
that's the thing. If you're
education
dealing
is
with
the root here.
if you're dealing with an educator that, because even with that, I mean, the position itself is only as good as the person that's holding it,
100%
right? So
has
if
to be
that
vetted.
person is science based, if that person has empathy and compassion, if that person's able to build an on-ramp program that's supported and respected, right? Because how many times have we seen where places have started ramp programs and then the employees there for 1 week and then the next week they're on the floor? That whole program is going out the door. And you can oftentimes be expected to just operate under that experience. And I hate it for technicians, and this is why I say they just end up getting played, is because when you don't perform well, they'll then also terminate you. Right. So it becomes a catch 22. And it becomes the reason why certain people take their education into their own hands because they don't want, to be subject to this environment.
And if the facility is not going to help you expand, like, that's a tough one. I think it's still a culture of education that needs to be established
Oh, it has to
more
be.
and
It
more in our
has to be.
community. I
Because
think
even for what Kyle is saying on why I do feel like that culture and that history that we have
I'm
is
not
the
just washing dishes.
foundation for that. But I think the reason why it perseveres is because of the lack of education that, like you said,
Yeah,
because
the
even the
lack of
people
education culture,
that
dude.
get
Like,
into those roles, they have no idea how to advance those conversations. None.
education is not a priority in the department, and that is what the friggin' root is. Because if your crew, if that is a priority for your day-to-day operations, you are going to strive for success, and you need to work it into your department day-to-day operations. Because the more and more that becomes the norm, the more and more we are going to get looked at as equal friggin' professionals here. So that's my sentiment on it. I really feel that education is the root of this problem, and the lack of education culture, which I've
I
ah
mean, even oh man. So going deeper into that, I wouldn't even push that on frontline. That is an education problem at a leadership level.
100%. It
You know,
starts with
it's oh
the top
man,
down, top
it
down,
starts
man.
at top down. And I mean even above a
That's where
sterile
the problem
processing
lies.
space, because when you are hiring those individuals and you're evaluating them for competence, if the only things that you have to go off of are years of experience and degrees of certificates, right? You're not able to fish for what is truly going to allow your team to thrive.
You need to
And
get
this
the
is one of
right
the reasons
person.
why I think women as leaders are the natural choice.
Yeah,
Because
but you
if you
also,
haven't had a tough mom,
but there are plenty of women out there that don't have the people skills, though. So
oh heck yeah,
my thought is that your leadership team needs to back this, and your leadership team, you need to vet people that are going to be if you have a staff educator, that's phenomenal. But anybody that's going to be educating or training or have that interaction with an employee, you need to vet the crap out of them. They have to be compassionate, they have to be empathetic, they have to be patient. They cannot be somebody that's standoffish. You have to be approachable, because I'm not going to go to Fred, who's going to demean me if I ask him a question.
I was about to say, I don't know. Like I love all of these labels, and I think this is we might need to do like a little spin-off episode on this, because
100%.
what
I'm feeling
what
it.
does make the perfect leader? I think about I
I'm
think
thinking of
about
just
that, and
education.
one of the
But
I don't think there's much of a difference, because like even from a coaching perspective, because I think those leaders also have to be able to be tough. They have to be able to
I
set
agree.
high expectations. They have to be able to be no nonsense, right? So it takes a person that's able to be fluid through
Fluid.
all of those things. And that's one of the reasons why I say I think women are the more natural leader, because it's you're able to make that assessment from an emotional standpoint, but also bring in all of this data and science. There may be times where I feel like as a leader, I need to be a little bit softer with my approach for an individual, but my situation is demanding that let's go, right? And I might have to have the softer type of conversation with you at another time. But as individuals, I think it speaks to the fact that we have to be able to lean into that. My boss is not always going to come to me and say, Alessandra, would you please? Sometimes they're gonna say, Alessandra, I need that thing over there. And it's not something personal, like attack against you. It's just I'm driving for whatever this metric is. I think the more that leaders are able to own all those facets of themselves and really be transparent with their technicians, their frontline staff, because I don't think it really matters if it's SPD or wherever, right? as long as you're able to build that relationship with your teams, they get
Yeah.
to a point where they can trust you and they know how to respond to what is
Yeah.
being asked of
Because if
them.
they're educated enough on the process, right?
Right?
If they're educated enough on
The
how the department
process, the
functions and
reasons
why,
why.
but also have that trust and respect for the leadership team. When you say, I need you to grab that real quick, they're not going to think of it as an attack. They're going to do what you say because they know what you're saying needs to happen and it's the right thing.
Yeah. It
So,
makes a big difference.
so
Now
the
that
pay,
that
yeah,
being said, you don't always see that on the floor, right? I've had employees that get emotional. They take it personal. They feel attacked. And it's like I hear you. I do hear you, and especially from a trauma standpoint, we'll definitely have episodes coming down the line talking more about this. But it's like that is real, and I'm not telling you, just be able to take any other kind of treatment at work. But do understand, healthcare, especially sterile processing surgical services, is a high stressful environment.
right.
If you can't handle that type of go go go, it might not be the space for you. And I've definitely had to have conversations with people like that where it's like, are you sure
Are you
this
sure
is the
you
space
can do
that
this?
you want to be in? Right. All right, so we're at an hour 06. I want to read this last comment from Kyle, and thank you so much, Kyle, for joining us and being so interactive in the conversation. We really do appreciate it. This is episode 1 of Behind the Red Line, season 2, where we were talking about getting played or getting paid at work. If you guys have more questions or comments about that, please do drop them in the chat. We can always round back. We'll be with you every other Monday, 6:30 Eastern Standard Time. So Kyle said I was recently reviewing job pay ranges for positions at that very hospital recently. They were offering significantly more money for kitchen staff over sterile processing.
I
So
hear
this,
it every day. And they got billboards outside of Domino's,
let me
Dunkin',
tell you
whatever.
something, buddy. Put in an application.
Unfortunately, that has to be your answer. I
It doesn't
can't,
have
I
to be,
can't, I
but
can't.
it could be.
It's one of those things where, unfortunately, you're going to get some people coming in every day. Like, I could go work at Dunkin' down the road and make $20 an hour starting right now.
This was, in fact, that last year in management was the first year that I ever had a VP look at me and ask me what were we going to do about our competition from Amazon and McDonald's,
Right?
because they were opening new facilities around us and they were going to be starting at $18 an hour. And I do believe my techs there were making something in the like 19 to 20
Jealous.
range to start, right?
Yeah.
So that's real. This though is another factor, because you have to look at that department, and I know I know who you're talking about. It's gonna be clever with this, but they're in a crisis. So
They're
just like
right.
sterile processing departments have been in crisis for staffing, so are other departments in the hospital. And so they're getting competitive, right? So one of the things that they've decided to do is offer higher rates of pay. There's all extra type of incentives that are going on. So yes, there are some
This is the
areas that are getting paid more. I love Sharon Green Golden for this because Sharon Green Golden was always like, first of all, why are you even going there? Because it means that you're now devaluing the work that they do. From a sterile processing perspective, if I'm looking at what the kitchen staff are making and I'm going, but the kitchen staff are making more than me, that's saying that I think that they should be making less. Their work is less important, and it's not.
it's not.
It's
They
not.
are a gear of that hospital just like you are.
They are a major gear. They feed these people.
They feed
They
everybody.
keep them
They feed
nutritionally
you.
balanced.
Yeah.
They make sure that they don't die from getting food allergies and all types of nutritional deficits they might have to be taken into account. Religious things they have to take into account, dietary restrictions they have to
There's a
take into
lot to
account,
it.
and they are, especially when it comes to patient satisfaction. Patients on those surveys, it can make or break the score of your hospital if they don't feel like
That's
their
true.
food was good or their room was clean, right? And when it comes to that, that's how we all eat, is whether or not the patients come in. So I wouldn't look at it at that from that perspective. I would say if you want to make that price point, go apply and or look into the sterile processing markets and figure out where you can go make that at, because it's totally possible.
Right.
But
And if
most of
you
us are just complaining. We don't really care.
but like we were saying earlier, like at that point, this is the period of the great resignation, but also the great renegotiation, y'all. This is a point where the hospitals are suffering because, well, not suffering, that's a weird word for this.
No, but it's a good word. They are
But,
suffering.
I mean, no offense to the travelers, but there's a huge issue. The pandemic triggered a huge you know, I mean, there, how am I gotta use my words right now, but um basically there was a great resignation in the healthcare field through the pandemic. Healthcare was impacted greatly, but this is the point, because your hospitals are now, you know, they're like, oh, maybe we should pay people a little bit more so we don't have to pay these travelers this exorbitant amount.
Yeah, right. Because I mean,
Some of
come
them
on,
maybe.
everything finance. So we're gonna have to do it. So we're gonna
But
have to
this is
do
where, like, if you're truly bothered
another.
by the fact that Domino's is paying whatever, that's when you can email your HR and be like, can I get a salary range? What's the current market rate for this person? No, you don't think so? Let me speak it. Speak it.
So the reason why I would say no as an individual is because I'm not trying to put that target on my back of being the one that started to incite everybody to start asking about this pay thing. But I do think that you are in a unique position to come into the offices with your managers and start talking about higher rates of pay. That's the first stop, no matter what role you're in. So if you're a technician, a supervisor, a lead, whatever, and you're thinking that you want to be paid more, the first person you need to talk to is your manager. Because they're going to be the ones to tell you how likely, what type of possibility is this even to occur. You may be surprised at the options that are there. I think communicate. I'm gonna be very honest. There's more wiggle room in leadership positions than there is in salary positions, right? But that doesn't mean that there is no wiggle room.
In leadership positions or salary, or you mean technician positions?
In hourly positions, sorry.
Hourly.
There's more wiggle room for salary conversations in salaried employment versus in hourly employment. But that doesn't mean that it can't happen, because with any position there is a salary range for that job, and when you apply for it, we're trying to be competitive too. So I'm not going to automatically offer you the highest that we can offer. You might be coming in somewhere in the mid to high range, or even low to mid range, depending on your experience and what other factors compensation is looking at. And it often is not a conversation that your direct hiring manager is involved in, especially in the hospital space. But
Right.
even when they are, if you're trying to make a shift, for your department, that I think requires a little more concert. You need to have a little more what's the word? I mean, I don't want to say union necessarily, because there's a lot of hospitals that are not in union environments, and it doesn't mean that you guys can't have this conversation too, of being real frank with saying, this is what we're making and it's not sustainable. We're not able to commute. We're not able to live in the area that we work in, and these are conversations that the healthcare industry is always having. So I think sterile processing as an industry needs more training about finances, about
Yeah.
negotiation, about leverage, because absolutely in this space with surgical services, you have a lot of power, right? But you want to make sure that you are giving people respect and opportunity to meet the new demands, if you will, that you have, or the new expectations that you want to share with them. But I think it's we saw last year, Denard and I did a interview with a gentleman out of Cook County in Illinois, and he was a part of an SEIU strike that took place, and it was actually at that time, I do believe they still hold, that they were the longest strike in Cook County history. And so some of the sterile processors went out, and SEIU represents many service departments, so like in some spaces that includes EVS, and includes nutrition services, can include many different folks. So they weren't the only ones on the picket line. However, once the whole thing was said and done, they almost agreed to the exact same contract that they walked out on. So even from this perspective of like, well, let's just unionize, or let's just strike, there still has to be so much talk and conversation and planning around what it is that you want, why you want it, and how feasible it is to get it to you. Because I can walk into the office and say, I think I'm worth $1 million, but that doesn't mean that they're going to give it to me, right?
But
And that
like,
doesn't demonstrate that I have a well-researched point, that I've taken into consideration the market, that I've looked at, what I bring to the table, that I've taken a look at their profits, and I'm coming and I'm having an educated conversation with you about my worth here.
and sometimes adjustments can be made quickly, and sometimes
Hmm.
they take a lot of time.
Yeah.
So you have to realize that sometimes you can't expect something to happen overnight. If it does, that's great. But in reality, a lot of these adjustments take some time. You know,
Hmm.
if your HRs or if your uppers are going to do a market, uh, look at the market data, it may take a week, a couple weeks. It's not
Yeah.
going to be
It could
something
take more. If
that's
you're in a contract environment, it could take a year or more. I think as an industry, something that we could benefit from is more education in this space, because even as individuals start to negotiate for higher rates of pay or walk away from positions, I've walked away from positions I just didn't feel like the offer was made any sense to me. Like I had an offer once from a facility, and they were offering a lower rate than the facility that I was leaving, even though they were in a more metropolitan area. It was very confusing. They were in a bigger city, not far away, and they wanted to offer a lower rate. And that was simply from their perspective, because in the city, their direct competition, they were on par. But for me coming 40 minutes out, 50 minutes out, they weren't in competition with us. And I told them very frankly, I'm like, no, I'm not walking away from this position for less than what I'm currently making. And their retort was, well, our benefit package is amazing. And I was like, no, it's not. It's the same. Right.
you
So
have to do your research. Yeah.
you have to do your research. You have to know what you want. You have to know what you need, what your family needs, right? There's a million different things to take into consideration. But I think the main point, what I hope listeners take away from today, as far as getting paid or getting played, is, have you really determined what that looks like for you? What helps you feel compensated, and then created that environment for yourself? Because I don't think that anybody should just be waiting for somebody to just this, right, just money, here you go, right?
No,
The market adjustments are nice, but I don't want that to be
you
the
have to
only
be your
way.
own advocate here. You have to be your own advocate. And
Yeah.
it's hard because a lot of us don't necessarily have the confidence or the we're not at a point where we can do that for ourselves. And
Yeah.
so it takes a lot, but you need to stand up for yourself and be your own advocate so
Stand up
you're
for
not getting
yourself.
stepped on.
Yes, because this is not easy work. And anything that is requiring this much of us, I think it's important for us to make sure that it's giving back. And so, I want employees to feel more comfortable having these conversations, but also want to be very honest about how some of these conversations may or may not go, because it can be positive, it may not be received as positively. But again, it's about you, and what do you want to do, and what do you want to see for yourself? Because even if it doesn't go that well, that gives you more information about that space. Maybe it's time for you to move on.
Yeah.
Thinking about that, as we wrap, thinking about that, client that I worked with, once they determined that the facility wasn't ever really going to see them in that light, they started applying other positions and automatically took, I mean, it wasn't, it was like maybe a couple of weeks later, was offered a position with a higher title,
Yep.
higher rate of pay. Now that person's making more money than they've ever made in their life, while finally holding the title that includes all the jobs they were already really getting into, right? And it's a loss to that other space, but it's a gain for them. So now that person is in a space where they don't feel like they're getting played, because they're not, and they're able to take that experience of getting played and make sure that they don't repeat it in their new environment, right? So if I'm able to then make better choices, able to advance myself even further, right? Because I'm getting paid, but I'm also making sure that I've got my sanity and there's balance here.
Yes,
So
that's
I
important.
love, I love to see people win. Because it's easy to get lost out here, and healthcare will eat you up, like, and spit you out for dinner, for real.
Meh.
It
It's
is
tough
not for
out
the faint.
here.
It's not for the faint. It really ain't. All
Oh,
right,
that's another
guys, that has been that.
thing.
Episode
Episode
one,
1 in the
season
books.
2, Behind the Red Line. Just a reminder, this show will be exclusive to our YouTube channel. So if you're not currently following the Process Media on YouTube, make sure you head over there. We'll drop the links in the chat, and just go ahead and subscribe. That way you will be notified every time the Process Media Group goes live. We do have currently 3 shows airing on the channel. The Process Podcast, airing every Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Behind the Red Line, airing every other Monday at 6:30 Eastern Time. And of course, our latest show, Voices, airing every other Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time.
What can they look for on Wednesday's episode of the Process podcast?
Ooh, we're back.
I know what's going down on Wednesday night.
So Wednesday night, family, we back. We will be live Wednesday, 7 p.m. We're gonna come back with an episode of Hot Topics. We figured what better way to return. I personally cannot believe that we have been off since April. It's insane. But conference circuit was super intense, and we just could not do everything. So we decided to travel and bring you guys live content from HSPA, from FIME, from CCSA, from our live trainings at MedTech College. We've been doing public speaking at Aseptic Technique. We've been doing it all over the place. So we did financial education and training with the East Oakland Youth Development Center,
which was something so unique and special. That was, we got to do more of that stuff too.
We have to do more. It makes me kind of want to tear up right now. But one of the things, what we trained with them on was finances. We talked about financial negotiations. We talked about salary. We talked about benefits. And these were with a group of high school students. So they are graduating this year. They're already learning how to do their resumes and applying to jobs in the workspace. And we were able to give them some of the keys to financial success early, so that when they do decide to join these hospitals, they're not coming in with too many stars. They understand that there's things in there for them like tuition reimbursement, that they're able to train and get these certifications, and they're able to make smart choices.
That's
about
the kind
their
of stuff
money.
I wish I learned in high school.
Pow, right? Exactly. Stuff that we needed. And so that's what the Process Media is about, giving back to our community and making sure that they have the tools they need to be successful. So look forward to more great content. This season on the Process, will be airing that lovely marathon. So there will be a 12-hour marathon celebrating the start of Sterile Processing Week. So that's Sunday. We will kick off at 12 p.m. and we will end at 12 a.m. I'm super excited to have you with us for that, because last year Denard and I ran that marathon as a 2-man team, and
but it wasn't 12. It was 20. Was it 12 hours or was it 24?
No, it was 12 hours. Don't say 24 in front of Denard. He might try to make us do it. But it was insane. We have some events planned. Yes. We have some more trainings coming up that'll be available to you as well. So definitely make sure you're on that YouTube space and that you've linked in with us. If you're on LinkedIn, the Process Media Group is there. You can also follow us under the Process Podcast. And then if you're on Facebook, I would highly suggest you get into the Process group, because definitely a lot of our shows and our announcements and things will be there. So we want to make sure that you guys don't miss any of our content. I had a Process family member text me on Saturday during the CCSA event. And he's like, I didn't know you were going to be live today. And I was like, that's because you're not following the socials, buddy.
We are in the process of the process. We're streamlining stuff for everybody, right? So on Facebook, it is the Process parentheses SPD parentheses. Okay. That's our Facebook right now. And there's a lot of stuff going down in there. We're going to try to do more plugging in the other sterile processing groups as well.
That's why I push, find us on YouTube and subscribe, because you won't miss anything if you're there. And we've had a lot of growth over the summer. We've had some new sponsors come in. And so you'll be hearing about that on this week's episode of The Process. And just, some really exciting stuff. So I'm excited to work with y'all and to see the growth because I was looking at our YouTube page from when Denard and I started. We literally look like babies, and, and it was only like a year and a half ago now. I don't even know if it's fully a year and a half. So I don't know.
Okay. And so, if
I don't
there's
know.
anything you guys want to see, reach out. We'll talk about it. If
We'll
there's
talk
anything you
about
want us
it.
to do, reach out. We'll talk about it. If you want to sponsor us, hey, you let us know.
Call us, call
Call
us.
us. You want us to show
Season
up for
2 of
something?
Behind the Red Line. We'll be getting into some more spicy topics. Be sharing some more stories from our front line. But also hoping to bring in some really cool interviews for you guys. Like when we were at HSPA this year, we got a chance to talk with Shola Richards, who does some executive coaching and suicide prevention in the space. So we'll be talking about all of it. We'll be talking about sex, drugs, and money at work, body consciousness, female leadership, the pitfalls of success and beyond. But
Cannabis
mostly
in the
just
workplace is coming up.
God, wait. But mostly just want to make sure that we have this conversation space where we can get real about how we feel. And I think especially when it comes to money, I mean, they say money doesn't buy happiness, but when you're an employee, there is a price point where you have balance in your life, right? And it
That
feels
only that
good
money can provide.
to be able, right? That only that money can provide. So bump all
Stability.
that. And if you feel like you're not being paid what you're worth, let's have a conversation because
100%.
we can fix that. All right, y'all be well, take care, and if you are new to the space, head to our YouTube page and find season 1 of Behind the Red Line.
Thank you guys for listening. Good. It's good talk tonight,
That's
Alessandra.
good to be back, man.